We have rapidly improving AI algorithms that are able to do predictive kind of analytics on you as a person.
This is where it's this loop where you buy data, you spend money to buy data. From that, you build an AI model. The AI model makes predictions. You take action based on those predictions. You make money from that action, and with the money you made, you use some of that money to buy more data, and you loop, right?
What are some inspirational sources that guide your mental models, kind of future forward thinking for Ocean?
We are in a world where it's more confusing than ever, and but we all each individually have agency to affect kind of how we flow through our life.
Hi, I'm Veronica Manuel, and I'm joined by data, blockchain, and AI experts, Bruce Pond and Trent McConaghy of Ocean Protocol, where they are the founders. Today, we are going to be talking about artificial intelligence and Ocean Protocol. Thank you both for speaking with me today.
Great to be here.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into the AI motivations behind founding Ocean Protocol, I wanted to start with a quick, fun question. Can you recall the first time that each of you first heard about cryptocurrency? Was that kind of hearing an insane description from someone, or were you all ears and you knew that it was going to be a groundbreaking technology?
From my side, I was doing a lot of traveling. I was building banks, and I believe there was a write up in the MIT Technology Review, which I had subscribed to then, and it said there's this new technology that was borderless payments, and it was very technically written. And it was just a little sidebar, and I remember I stored it away, and but it seemed interesting. Because I was traveling so much and it was relatively technical to set up on your own computer to do the Bitcoin mining, I passed on all that until I actually came back in contact with Trent around 2012. And then we started talking a lot about Bitcoin and its implications globally.
Cool. And Trent?
Yeah, actually, it goes back to an AI conference that I was at in 2010, early 2010. And a friend of mine who was a contractor to U.S. Department of Defense, doing crypto stuff for them, he was tracking all this stuff very closely, and he shared it to me. And I immediately became very interested. So my friends and I would hang out often at the time I was living in Vancouver, and we would talk about it a lot, Bitcoin and stuff. But it was only until 2013 that I really got the blockchain side and, the revelations there. So yeah, 2010 was when I first heard about Bitcoin.
Cool. Yeah, I had a slightly crazier moment when someone told me first about Bitcoin, and I thought that they were an insane weirdo. And I just figured everyone had that similar experience, but you guys have each experiences that point to your strengths. Bruce in banking and Trent in AI, where you each have a lot of industry experience, and we'll certainly elaborate a bit on how those play into Ocean. I want to start with banking real quick because Trent was in AI, as a researcher, PhD, and utilized a lot of AI and data work. But Bruce, banking doesn't seem to be an AI intensive field at the onset, right? Kind of slow moving. How did you see? I know that you saw this blockchain mention or cryptocurrency mention, but did you see early instances of AI in banking? Certainly, you saw some uses of data. How did that kind of enter your mind as something applicable to Ocean?
So the banking was definitely a good backdrop for this meta narrative that I was starting to see. I had, before going into what I was doing with the banks, I had been helping to rationalize, I guess would be the word, rationalize IT landscapes. And from there, you have all these interfaces, connections, databases across, typically in the large organization, 150 to 500 different IT systems. And it's very clear that that's not something that's sustained itself. And Trent always talks about this n squared problem, where you add on one system, and then to connect them all, you have to it's a square in terms of the complexity that comes out in terms of connections and stuff like that. And so that was a part of everything that I had been doing my entire life when I was working in IT, is that We have all these disparate systems. They're trying to share data. Most of the IT administration, security, all that sort of stuff is all about access control. It's just an immense problem. And to the point where probably 2/3 of all the work that gets done in software in enterprise is just to get around this data sharing problem. Mm-hmm. And when I was talking with Trent, first about Bitcoin, but then about the broader implications, it was clear to me that having a centralized or a decentralized ledger that was globally shared, globally updated, and globally validated at the same time solved many of the data reconciliation problems, and then access to that data and the kind of read-write privileges and stuff would be kind of the next layer on top of that. So that's how, from banking, I saw how blockchain and crypto could feed directly into solving a lot of the capex that goes into our today's modern world.
Yeah, and certainly banking can benefit a lot from AI as well. I want to touch upon Trent's experience as well. Like, how did your background in AI research, like, what was it about data that led you into kind of the tokenization of data? Like, walk me through that thought process. Of course, the ledger being a very powerful tool, the blockchain ledger. But what was it about AI research you saw compatible with data, and why data?
Yeah, so my first sort of professional job in my career was I was working for the Canadian government, where I was given a task to make a classifier, an AI-based classifier, to automatically detect, to look at audio radar signals, which is just a radar that you can be listened to, and then typically there was a human operator that would say, okay, listening to this, I hear birds going by, or I hear soldiers walking by, or otherwise. And my task was to have it where it would take in this time series waveform of audio radar sounds and spit out a classification automatically. And I was given a corpus of data to work with. I was too junior to ask for more data. This was in 1997. So I spent, it was a summer job. I spent that summer, basically, I started off with an accuracy of 55%, so barely better than flipping a coin. And by the end of the summer, I got up to 65%. So, still being wrong 1/3 of the time. And the whole time I was basically iterating against this data set, trying different, techniques to classify, from simple linear models to fancier and fancier with, neural networks and genetic programming and all this. And then I followed that up the summer after that too, to try to push the accuracy even further. And it was really hard to make it super accurate, right? So, and what I should have done, looking back, one of these woulda, coulda, shoulda moments was I should have walked down the hallway to the people that had the audio radar and just gathered a bunch more data. But of course, hindsight is 2020, and at the time, that wasn't part of the culture of AI. If you look on AI, research in the 90s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, there would be some standard benchmark that people would have, say like MNIST for image recognition or otherwise, and then every researcher and their dog would be chasing that benchmark. And a lot of these had ended up as toy problems that weren't very useful. And I kind of had the same thing, not realizing to ask this question: how do I get more data? And what really changed it for me, it was about 2008. I was hanging out with a Google AI researcher, and he mentioned to me, hey, we published this paper a couple of years ago called The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Data, where, to get more accuracy, you keep the same algorithm or even have a simpler one, and you just add 10x more data and 100x more data and 1,000x more data. And so that takes a bit more engineering effort, but you no longer have to, have a PhD's worth of inventing algorithms just to have better accuracy. So, and from an AI perspective, it's kind of embarrassing, right? Because, AI researchers no longer have to, go in a corner and come up with fancy, cool new algorithms. Instead, you just throw more data at it and compute, of course. So that's why it wasn't talked about for a long time. But of course, Google used it at scale, and then others too. And even, by the late 2000s, one of the most popular AI algorithms out there to do classification was simply large-scale linear regression, like Google image search is based on that, and so on, where you would take an image of 1,000 by 1,000, so a million input pixels, a million input dimensions, and it would spit out a classification, and that actually worked pretty well, which is embarrassing, right? So I sort of had that tucked away in my back pocket. I was doing, applied AI at the time as well for chip design, at scale, et cetera. So, I was able to apply it there. And then, Bruce and I, with our third co-founder, Masha, we started work on NFTs on Bitcoin in 2013. So I kind of parked the AI stuff. We initially were working on, like digital art, right? How can collectors collect digital art? How do you own digital art? Answering that question, pulling on that thread. But a few years later, we ended up, basically doing a pivot simply because we were too early and we needed to find something that could get more traction. And around that same time, I've been revisiting AI now that I had several years of experience of blockchain. And I'd been asking the question, how can blockchain help AI? And to be honest, I was missing AI. The algorithms in blockchain are super fun, super interesting, but also the ones from AI are super fun and super interesting. So, for my brain, where I like to build and invent, the best fun of all is to play with both AI and blockchain. And that's, I started exploring that in 2016 with thought experiments, et cetera. And those thoughts and conversations around it, including with Bruce, is what led to Ocean.
Yeah, so I do notice that on the blog for Ocean Protocol, there are early mentions of AI for blockchain or blockchain for AI, right? And certainly the AI thoughts have been way early, possibly even before Ocean, right? Like at Ocean's inception, the idea of AI and incorporating that as a field into the world of decentralization was certainly like a pure intention in the beginning. I want to talk about Ascribe for a second, about the tokenization of art, because you said you pivoted from the tokenization of art, as most people know, NFTs, into Ocean Protocol, right? Which is a data sharing protocol that can certainly interface with AI. So, before it was popular to tokenize data sets, why art, and what is the overlap between Ocean and Ascribe?
Go to early 2013, and Bruce and I and Masha were hanging out a lot, right? We were all based in Berlin. So Masha happens to be my wife, but she also happens to be co-founder of Ocean. And by background, she is a professional curator. So she had, and museologist. So she has a master's in museology from the Louvre School, École de Louvre, had worked at the Louvre, had been running a gallery in Vancouver for contemporary art, had a lot of artist friends, worked with a lot of artists, people doing digital art and otherwise. And she'd been seeing where these people creating digital art had really great trouble monetizing them. They weren't able to charge as much. And there was always problems around, someone, bought some digital art as a DVD. They come back, they say it's scratched. They're like, give me a replacement. The artist says, no, it's you got the artifact, right? So there's all this confusion and these problems. And it was kind of weird because even, as of 2013, we were already in a very digital world, yet at the same time, it was very hard for artists to monetize creating digital artifacts. So there was this mismatch. And of course, we'd been talking a lot about blockchain by that time. And so Mash and I had just, I think, gone to some art exhibit in Berlin. And Masha started talking about this what was called an elephant in the room problem in the art world, which is, how do collectors collect digital art? And how can artists monetize that, right? And it's flip sides of the same coin. And then we kind of looked at each other and asked the question, what if you could own digital art the way you own Bitcoin? And that was the thread we pulled on, and kept pulling on. We looped in Bruce pretty quickly, and it turned out to be a really wonderful thread to pull. It was a really great question to ask, and sometimes it's all about the right question to ask. So that's what led to Ascribe. We weren't sort of tokenizing it per se. It was on Bitcoin. You would publish a Bitcoin transaction, and Bitcoin can have one or more inputs and one or more outputs. So if you publish, you would publish and say, okay, I've got 6 editions. So it would create one output for each of the different editions, and that's the way you would have editions. And we had a protocol around this saying, okay, if you do Bitcoin transactions shaped like this, then you have editions, you have transfer of ownership. Transfer of ownership was easy, right? Just one input, one output from address A to address B, and then editions, and then also renting and stuff too. Even that was the heart of it. How that evolved was we built it up, we grew it, built a wonderful team around Ascribe, and we actually had pretty good traction working with a lot of digital artists, more than 10,000 users, 40,000 works. But we went to raise Series A, and investors kind of balked because this was, I think, 2015, mid 2015, late 2015, and they were looking at our numbers using a Web2 lens because Web3 hadn't taken off. And so they were used to numbers, putting money into startups with, $1 million users or more. So our numbers were pretty terrible by those standards. So we realized we needed to pivot. We tried a few experiments and ended up going for a decentralized database, BigChainDB. Did that for a year and a half, 2 years. Worked with many enterprises, but then we saw basically that enterprise federated blockchain wasn't quite the way. Enterprises weren't quite ready yet, so we said let's go back to permissionless. And by that time, this was mid 2016. I was starting to think these thoughts around how can blockchain help AI and lots of other intersections like AI DAOs, all this, and having these conversations, including with Bruce. And so as we realized that, BigChainDB, it would be tougher to really grow and scale it than what else was out there to build on. And going back permissionless, looping back to AI, that was kind of the ideal. And then, from the conversations, we realized decentralized data marketplace was really a great solution to a lot of these problems around that AI researchers had. How do they get their hands on data to build really great models, et cetera, which we see even as a problem today still, that Ocean is working to address. And then on the flip side, how do people monetize their data? So, and that, of course, is very similar to art, right? How do collectors get their hands on digital art? How do the creators of that digital art monetize it, right? So it's very similar. And this is because at the very heart, they're both intellectual property, IP, and specifically falling under copyright law. So, if you have sweat off the brow to create something where there's a creative act and a couple more criteria, then you actually own these creative rights to it, right? And that was set up by a body of the UN called WIPO, World Intellectual Property Office, with guidelines, and then each country implements the laws around that. So, Ascribe was a means to sort of say, hey, here's my copyright claim, and then here's my ways of transferring ownership, licensing, et cetera. And Ocean is similar. In fact, identical that way, except Ascribe's main use case was digital art, and Ocean's main use case is data for AI. And of course, there's other things below. Ascribe is on Bitcoin. Ocean's really focusing around data, so there's a lot of tunings to serve the world of AI and those people. But conceptually, in many ways, they have a lot of similarities.
Yeah. So, at the heart of banking data, right, are ACID compliant databases and the issues or benefits thereof, right? So, looping in Bruce onto this decentralizing of data sharing, right? The ACID compliant databases, for our viewers who don't know, are basically databases, especially designed for resiliency in outages, synchronicity, so that the banking world can transact large volumes of money and know that those ledgers are shared, safe, in sync. You said, Bruce, that there is a lot of inefficiency, slow, costly IT maintenance of these systems. Is the blockchain as a vehicle for replacing ACID compliant, like traditional siloed data? How do you see that the tokenization of data for AI or researchers, right, like is applicable to replace the ACID compliance structure of data, right? Like, I guess what I'm trying to do is meld your banking experience, right, with what Trent is saying about how you can decentralize data and tokenize data for AI. So is that architecture the same that financial institutions can use for the blockchain? Or like, what are the smart contracts that define Ocean as different from just typical financial data sharing on chain, right? If that question makes sense. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think they're two different vectors.
Okay.
For banks, you can have various server clusters for redundancy of the data and all that sort of stuff, and it's a lot of investment. It's internal, and it's not I'd say like externalized, right? So it's a cost, and that's where your redundancy comes in, fault protection, failover, all that kind of stuff, backup, recovery, all that. And so from the data side, the fundamental aspect is that every system in a bank is designed for protecting against external threats as well as internal threats and unauthorized access. it's similar architecture. Probably got inspired by defense systems, and now it's gone into energy systems, banking systems, large industrials. It's all fundamentally the same, or was the same. And so, in turning that data into an asset, it's not really comparable to blockchain. A better comparison would have been something like Fernando de Soto's book in, I think it was 1999, called I think Dead Capital, and it talked about how if you can turn various capital assets towards the financial system, then that can help build up an economy. And his example was using real estate and property. And both Trent and I made a conclusion that since probably 90% of the value that's being created moving forward from 2010s onwards was of an intellectual property perspective, data, patents, designs, programming, all that sort of stuff. The ability to capitalize that asset, put the tools of finance on top of that, would be a groundbreaking innovation to unlock people's potential in a world where automation, robotics, mechanization was going to start destroying the jobs. And so the banking aspect, once again, I said, it's kind of a background narrative that demonstrated this meta narrative that data itself is in essence an asset class waiting to be capitalized, have the financial tools put on it, and blockchain is one of the fundamental technologies that's going to allow that to happen, along with the smart contracts and the cryptocurrencies. What we've seen now, like 10 years later, essentially, is that with something like ChatGPT, with the current advances in AI and such like that, the native currency of AI, I don't think Trent and I realize this, but the native currency of AI is cryptocurrency. They don't deal with fiat US dollars, coins, or anything like that. They deal with cryptocurrency. Number two is the orchestration that you can do with AI should happen over smart contracts because then it's auditable, you can see what happened, etc. And then the data, where an AI needs, in order to be fully accurate, has to be on a blockchain, because then it's verified, it's validated, or at least you know that somebody made a claim on a blockchain at that specific time of this statement of fact. And then you get rid of all this kind of you get rid of all this fake news, because anybody who does something on a blockchain, it's tied to identities, so you can't obfuscate that. So long-winded answer, but what I would say is the world that we worked in, both Trent and I actually 20 years ago, still probably needs about 10 or 15 years to see how this groundbreaking technology is really going to change their whole architecture. Just like what we're seeing recently with this discovery of semiconductor or superconductors. Superconductors means we have to redesign everything from the ground up. I believe that blockchain is the same thing, except for the financial system and the capitalization of data, intellectual property, AI, etc.
Yeah. So, bringing to the point, or bringing into the loop here, the fact that there is a lot of financial data on the ocean marketplace, right? There's clearly an interest in not just using the ledger of the blockchain in financial transactions to transact money in a transparent, trustless way, but there's actually financial data that is in itself valuable on the ocean market. It is tokenized right now. How maybe, I don't know if this question is more suited for Trent, for example, how, or Bruce, you as well, given that you guys have different perspectives, right? But approaching the problem of training an AI with the financial data that is on Ocean Protocol, like how do you see that working out in the future? I know that there's still room for big data to be uploaded and tokenized on chain using Ocean smart contracts, but given that potential, like how do you see that financial data materializing and adding value through an AI to humans as a public good using those Ocean tokenized financial data?
So overall, we've had the data marketplace side of Ocean running since fall of 2020 as part of V3. And over the years, people have published lots of different data sets and data services, et cetera. And, a lot of them, just like startups in a sense, don't take off. Maybe one person buys them, maybe no one, and so on. So what is it that, what data sets, data services is it that people actually want to buy or come back to buy and stuff, right? Which things are valuable? And this has always been a perennial question in Ocean. People ask me all the time, which data sets are the most valuable, et cetera. And so over the years, we had various hypotheses about this. And also, how do you fill the market more, right? Do you try to get a supply side filled, or do you try to get demand side? Do you try to get both at once? And we came up with this formulation that we call the data value creation loop, right? And this is where it's this loop where you buy data, you spend money to buy data. From that, you build an AI model. The AI model makes predictions. You take action based on those predictions. You make money from that action, and with the money you made, you use some of that money to buy more data, and you loop, right? It's a bit like the OODA loop tuned for data in a sense, or just a startup. But then the question is, okay, so if you want to have a successful sort of data startup at all, where you're selling data, your customers need to be able to go through that loop, right? They need to be able to buy your data, use your data to make money, and then come back and buy more data iteratively. So then you can analyze, okay, well, if you want to do well as a startup, you have to be able to go through that loop quickly, or you have to have super deep pockets and super long funding. So if you're doing, say, healthcare, for FDA approval, you're looking at 7 years, 10 years, whatever, right? So you can do it, but it'll take a long time, right? That's one dimension, is how quickly you can go through the loop. Healthcare is a slower example. Financial is very fast, right? Hedge funds and DeFi traders trade on the order of 1 block or 1 minute or 1 hour, right, for money. So that's the opposites in time scale. 1 minute versus 10 years. That's how quickly you can go through the loop. The other dimension is TAM, size of the market, and how big of an impact can Ocean have on that, right? So Ocean could have tremendous impact in the health market, right, to help coordinate for sharing of data sets. Imagine training a cancer prediction model across 1 billion people by having a way to decentralize training in a truly decentralized way across everyone's phones or across 10,000 different hospitals, and then you can have super low error in these predictions, which means you can detect cancer earlier, at the beginnings of stage 1 rather than partway through stage 2, and that can save a lot of lives. So there's and that you can solve a big problem, and then there's that it leads to a large total addressable market, or TAM. Financial is also big, right? Whether it's TradFi or DeFi. And there's other things where it's much lower, right? Much smaller. If you're doing, just a data marketplace for kids to sell information about comic books published between 1972 and 1976, it's probably going to be a small market, right? So then overall, you can ask, okay, for going through this data value creation loop, from buying the data, building a model, making predictions from the model, taking action on those predictions, making money, to buy more data, loop, you want to be fast, and you want to have a large TAM to extract value from it. So with that, the fastest, largest value, the top of the list is financial, right? TradFi and DeFi, right? And then, other things fall back. A lot of other Web3 stuff is very fast with different sizes. Some of the social media stuff that's emerging is very fast. Not quite as big TAM yet, but there's other opportunities. And there's other things like music, which are pretty cool. I love music, but it's very, very hard to make money in it because it really relies on the back catalog, which is the majority of that is controlled by Universal. Plus, there's a couple other huge players. So that's kind of my sort of running hypothesis overall. One thing whenever we're working on Ocean, it's like, okay, how well can this particular application or vertical go through this loop? But it also helps to explain your question, Veronica. Why are we seeing more and more financial data on Ocean Market? And that's my theory why. Simply because you can loop through it quickly, this data value creation loop, and there's real dollars attached.
Yeah, so people are interested in buying tokenized data sets that are financial, right? Either DeFi or TradFi, as you mentioned. But I want to talk about, for example, AI. Like, I feel that there is a sticky question here where big data is what's necessary for training AI. Do you see Ocean Protocol as a group of smart contracts applicable to training AI with big data. Of course, the data marketplace that Ocean has houses some data, but that data may not be large enough to train truly a financial AI prediction output, right? So can Ocean smart contracts be used in a way to truly train AI with big data?
Absolutely, yes. And they are already, right? To be clear, Ocean helps to manage data access, right? The data can be off-chain or on-chain, right? It can be off-chain via sitting in, some Web2 cloud like AWS or Azure, or you can be sitting on your local server, or it can be sitting on some Web3 decentralized storage like Filecoin or Arweave. Or even if it's very small, you could have it sitting directly on an EVM style chain inside a smart contract, right? Data is cheaper than most people realize, even on the EVM chains. So just to establish that, right? So you can have big data that it can flow through the Ocean system, and then to train models to do, say, predictions to predict the price of ETH or the price of Tesla stock or otherwise. You don't need a huge amounts of data, of course, in order to get enough accuracy to make money, right? Of course, the more data you have, the better the accuracy, and the more profitable you are, right? And we've even done internal experiments on this, as well as we've been running competitions called Predict ETH, which we recently rebranded to Challenge Data Farming and put it as part of our data farming program, where every week competitors can come in and predict the price of ETH 5 minutes ahead, 10 minutes ahead, up to 60 minutes ahead. And those results are actually pretty cool, right? And people submit how they approach this in the earlier stages of this competition, maybe the first 6 months. Now we allow it all to be anonymous, and in general, they weren't using large data sets. So the summary of my answer is simply: you don't need large data sets to make predictions with decent enough accuracy to make money. But the larger the data is, the more accurate you can be, the more money you can potentially make. And Ocean can handle data sets small and large.
Yeah, so to me, the kind of common sense question is to be compelling to an AI researcher to purchase big data, for their training of their AI model, right? It needs to be pooled in a sense, right? And right now, there are data silos out there, even within the Ocean ecosystem, that are, there's data that is tokenized, right? But it's not necessarily pooled in such a way that it can all be fed in a clean manner to AI. Would you say? Or there are actually some AI researchers right now using pools of Ocean data sets. Like, even though the smart contracts are capable of doing this, like, is there an ability to pool tokenized data sets right now using Ocean? And I don't want to reiterate my previous question. Just to be clear, this is about the grouping of financial data that already exists. Do you see that happening, that there's these pools being created of financial data using Ocean smart contracts?
I can maybe answer this quickly, and Bruce, you can add to it. So in terms of pooling data, you can do it, you can buy data from 5 or 10 or 50 different sources via Ocean, via Web2 marketplaces, scrape your own data, whatever, via free APIs, and then you can merge it however you like, right? And then in order to train your model or models. And people do that, right? Definitely, and including some internal work we've been doing. That's, it's all of the above. You can, there is this technique called federated learning that got popularized via Google in about 2017, where it's, taking a bit of data from silo number one, say hospital number one, and a bit from hospital number two, and so on. And from all of that, it's creating an overall model and trying to do it where each hospital only has to supply its data, and there's not a privacy risk at the hospital level. The challenge with Google-style federated learning is that Google was still in the middle doing the aggregation. So then the question is, can you have sort of leaf nodes decentralized, like traditional federated learning, but also have the aggregation decentralized? And
Right.
yeah, so actually there is a project within the Ocean ecosystem called Felt Token, and they're doing exactly this. It's decentralized federated learning. So the leaf nodes are decentralized data, and the aggregation and merging side is also decentralized, leveraging Ocean's computed data technology features. And yeah, they're iterating with many other folks in the Ocean ecosystem, such as the Delta DAO guys in the Gaia X side, and I believe maybe also some iterations with Daimler Eccentric as well, and probably others. So yeah, I'm quite excited about that. That can be used for medical, it can be used for financial, it can be used for otherwise. And I see it has great promise.
Yeah, and then Bruce, did you want to chime in about the pooling of financial data using smart contracts? Do you see, what are your comments on seeing some of that materialize? And then how do you think that might change the game for traditional banking?
So I'm actually going to pop Stack and say, I think your question, the premise is, where do you get that adoption? And you're focusing on one specific kind of feature or set of components within Ocean that could facilitate that.
Right.
And the way I'm going to pop Stack is in two ways. Number one is when the internet hit its moment and you had all these browsers come up, you had this massive wave of libraries and companies and individuals digitizing what they had analog. Books got scanned, newspapers put on microfiche, put back into the internet. Companies, we all put some of our writing, scanned it, put it onto the internet. And so there was a huge hunger and a virtuous circle of people asking for these newspapers to have their archives digitally searchable. So that's what was one of the things. And then we had more devices that were automatically collecting that data and putting it directly onto the internet, until now we have essentially live streaming goes directly onto the internet into storage and stuff like that. So that's the adoption kind of dynamic for the internet. And now we're looking at the adoption dynamic for crypto, data, and AI. And I see those are completely intertwined. For me, if we're focused only on the AI side and on the financial side, which I also think is probably one of the best initial use cases, right? Financial data, short loops, crypto native people as well, because they're the ones who understand this technology. That's kind of the area where I think that the first adoption is going to happen. But where you're going to have real adoption in terms of a broader, or the early majority or the full majority or the laggards. This is how I would see it. We have rapidly improving AI algorithms that are able to do predictive kind of analytics on you as a person. Mm-hmm. And if there's a package of kind of algorithms that you can present as a service where people are encouraged to upload all their photos, upload all their writings, all their social media, all their communications with other people, so they can get a picture of themselves. Very narcissistic. Give me a picture of me. How could I be better at work? How could I be smarter? How could I be faster? All this kind of stuff, kind of compelling me to upload all my data and make it available for this AI. I think that's the angle where AI is really going to hit its stride, and you're going to then have this mass of data coming in, touching AI, being, I guess, on crypto rails, assuming that Ocean is going to play a role in that. So, your question was, can you bundle it? Can you do this with the smart contracts, all that sort of stuff? Popping Stack, you look at the internet, how it got adopted. It was a virtual circle. And I think that's going to be the same thing with crypto, AI, and data. Right now, more and more payment providers are integrating crypto. Very likely, Twitter or X, I guess it's called now, is going to integrate that stuff. So that the crypto payment rails is there. The AI is rapidly improving. And now what we need is for people to then give their data up in a way that they feel comfortable, but then serves their purposes. And then we're going to have that the holy trilemma or the holy three coming together and creating the start of a new data economy.
Yeah, so I know you guys, your time is very valuable, so I will keep it to two more questions. So regarding the early days of the internet, as you mentioned, I was curious to touch on one point that you said about searchability of data on the internet. How would an AI DAO or an AI researcher controlling an AI model be able to search effectively through tokenized data to be able to determine, okay, this is the data that I need to aggregate either via federated learning or manually? Like how does that searchability problem get solved?
Yeah, so I see overall, it's actually not searchability, it's discovery, right? And then how do you solve the problem of discovery of data or artifacts of knowledge?
Uh-huh.
And there's several, there's actually typically three key pillars of that. There's browsing, search, and filtering. So you want to be able to just browse, click from one thing to the next, and just sort of explore that way. You also want to be able to search, typically text-based search, but you can do image-based, whatever, where it has some ideally natural language style query, but then maybe it gets converted to something machine under the hood, doesn't matter, spits back results. And then the third is filtering, right? So once you have search results, can you quickly filter among them to say, okay, I only want results that were generated in the last day, or only results where it has the name Veronica in it or something. So that would be the three things. To answer your question overall, then, the idea of discovery is it's a perennial challenge you have whenever building systems for people interface, etc. And before web search, we had Yahoo. If for those of us who are a bit older, a bit showing our years, growing around the temples. And it was basically, one giant index page, right? And it started to get really unwieldy, actually. So, they decided to, embed this tiny little search thing on the side from this tiny little startup called Google, and that ended up eating up all their traffic. And then, so now, for the last 20 or so years, we've had search as the main way to discover data. But, an interesting stat is in the last year, Stack Overflow has its traffic is divided by two. Stack Overflow is a Q&A site for coders, trying to answer questions in software development. And what's happened is that now we have another approach, which is you type in your question into ChatGPT or something similar, and it answers it, right? And that's another path to discovery, right? Under the hood, you can view that as making a prediction, or you can view it as discovery of a previously unseen point, or maybe a previously seen point in the space, depending on sort of how you want to approach it philosophically. But overall, it's different approaches to the problem of discovery, right? So and this will just keep happening. There's going to be continue to be new ways to discover things, right? You can use Google Maps and browse like that. You can walk around. You can ask questions of your friends. You can ask ChatGPT. You can ask Google. All these different things. And so and it's going to be side by side with basic elements of computing, which is storage and computation and process and bandwidth communications, and these elements on top, things like access control, which is like Ocean, and then payments, like Bruce had mentioned, right? And identity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these elements that play together. So to summarize overall, you had asked, where does Google style search fit in, and how does Ocean play? The meta question to popping stack is really about, what does discovery look like in the future? And it's all of the above, but often AI powered. ChatGPT style things are starting to have a big impact. And then under the hood, Ocean will be a part of this. Now, already the way that Ocean is, there's the data. Maybe the data itself, whether it's a service or a static file or otherwise, it's behind. It's token gated, so it's behind these gates. But there's metadata that's public, right? And so, and you use that metadata to discover what it is you buy. Just like if you go to Amazon.com, you do a search for Optimus Prime transformer, then you'll have more than 100 hits of all these different shapes and sizes of Optimus Prime. But and that's basically the metadata. It'll say like the name, the manufacturer, have some photos, etc. Similar thing happens when you search for data with Ocean, right? You see who published it, some HTML-based description, and some more. And that's going to keep happening, right? But that's going to be side by side with all this other data. In fact, it already is, right? You can do a Google search and find data that's sitting on Ocean Market and other data out there too. So.
Yeah, so presumably, it would be discoverable, for example, if an AI was able to purchase all of the data sets on Ocean Market or that have been tokenized using Ocean smart contracts, and then being able to query that AI that has gone ahead and aggregated all of that information on all of those data sets, either by purchasing the data token to get access to that data, or the discovery of valuable predictions of being able to query just on the metadata, aggregated metadata of all of the tokenized data sets using Ocean smart contracts. So I to paraphrase what you said, if I'm not incorrect there.
Yeah, that's about right.
Cool. So I do want to ask both of you guys, I like to lighten things up at the end as far as what are some inspirational sources that guide your mental models or kind of future forward thinking for Ocean or even just personally. So what kind of books or podcasts are you listening to or role models that you follow? Bruce, I'll start with you. Go ahead and give me some things that you want our viewers to take a look at to enhance their intellect around data, crypto, AI.
Well, I think the highest level principle that I would have for Ocean is we are in a world where it's more confusing than ever, and but we all each individually have agency to affect kind of how we flow through our life, and a core part of that is the ability to have free thoughts, free speech, and the ability to have commerce with whomever you want, and not obstructed by external factors like government, banks, etc. If you choose not to. So those are the values that we hold very dearly within Ocean and what we want to promote, because I strongly believe that 8 billion people on Earth will find the right answer if they have that agency, rather than it being intermediated through other third parties like governments, banks, etc.
So, but are there any kind of content that you consume that guide that thinking, like kind of books or movies, or what do you recommend that people look at? Who are interested in thinking the way you do, right, about these intractable problems.
There's a lot, but the one that comes. Sorry to say this, but the one thing that comes to my mind is 1984. So I'll hand it over to Trent.
Oh wow. I think that says a lot about how people are regarding their data usage in the future, and maybe kind of inspire some fear and suspicion of powers that be. But Trent, like, what kind of content do you consume that motivates your creative juices flowing about solving these problems?
Yeah, I mean, overall, you are what you read. So it does. It makes sense to read lots of things, to learn, to be aware, not to be naive, but then to bias, to read more of the stuff, such that your brain gets colored with how you want to think and bias. So read a lot of solar punk sci-fi. Sci-fi with positive visions of the future, 20 years from now, 100 years from now, 500 years from now, and there's a quote, I forget who said it. It's easier to predict the far future than the near future. And so sci-fi is really great for that. And once you have a prediction of the far future, 20 years, 100 years from now, whatever, then interpolate. And interpolation is a lot easier than extrapolation. So right now, people are normally thinking about, okay, here's today, and oh my goodness, there's more news next week, tomorrow. Or so, if you're not thinking about it very much, then it feels like the future is crashing into you, right? Mm-hmm. But instead, if you actually have read a bunch of more solar punk sci-fi, things like Charles Stross Accelerando and Werner Vinge Rainbow's End, and many more by authors like that, and even classic Asimov and Heinlein and so on, then you've got all these possible futures that you can aspire towards, and then interpolate, build backwards. It's sort of like, this map for civilization, technology tree, whatever, and then ask yourself, what are the things that might happen next? What might happen next? And this is actually how I see the world. So when another thing happens, like creative AI goes mainstream, to me, when that happened in the last couple of years, it's like, okay, cool, check, that just happened, right? Mm-hmm. So, but it's also quite empowering feeling, because you don't feel like the future is crashing into you and you can't do anything about it. Instead, you can say, okay, what are some of the developments that could, a couple nodes down where there could be a huge impact? And what can I do now to make an impact towards those developments? And that's what Ocean is on. Ocean is on helping to make an impact to unlock some of these nodes, because there's a lot of positive things about AI and a lot of potentially negative, as well as around privacy, etc. And if we can empower individuals and groups of people and ever larger groups of people to manage their own data, therefore manage their own privacy, then this can have a very positive influence for the future, right? Whether it's for brain-computer interfaces or helping to solve climate or for helping to keep AI safer, right? So that's kind of how I view it. Sci-fi, and if I had to pick a single sci-fi book, that's a good broad overview. Charles Stross, El Accelerando.
Cool. So now I have to read that. And Ben Goertzel also recommended by Stanislaw Lem, Solaris. I've seen in a few interviews. So I got to get up on the sci-fi, and 1984 as well. If I want to think like the smartest people in the room. So I had a great time speaking with you both. Guys, let us know in the comments below what you thought about this interview, if there were topics that you would like to see us cover. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this in the future.